All right, so this has sat for a few minutes. So I'm gonna take my spatula out of here, lay it down, and I'm going to divide this evenly between my molds. Now you can see that this mold is not one of the molds that I used to show you how to measure how much resin you're gonna need, only because I had grabbed the other one to show you. So this gets evenly distributed between the 4 molds, and we're filling them up halfway. We do not want this to fill up entirely, because we need to fill this up halfway. We need to do what I'll show you in a minute for the texture, and we need to let that set before we add the rest of the resin in order to finish the technique. All right, make sure that it's all the way to the sides. If not, use your spatula to push it into the corners of the mold. And then we're going to use our heat gun to remove the bubbles, and we need to make sure that all of the bubbles are removed before we add the texture to the center. So I'm just using a heat gun, so this emits heat. It blows it a little bit, but I've got it on low, so it's really not blowing it a lot. When I put it on high, you can see that it really blows it, but we're just using the heat to remove the bubbles. You could also use a spray bottle with isopropyl alcohol. That would work as well. If by chance you see bubbles that are clinging to the mold, get a toothpick and release them so that they raise to the surface. So I'm just going to go pause a minute and get a toothpick. So once you have your toothpick, it's actually quite easy to see the ones that tend to stick to the surface of the mold. You'll find them at the bottom, and you'll also find them along the edges. And typically, just in case there's ones that I'm not seeing, I will take my toothpick and I will run it along the crease just to remove them all. If by chance you miss one and it cures with a bubble in the surface, you can just pour a thin layer of resin over top to correct it. So you haven't ruined anything if you happen to miss one. It's just nice to catch them before you get to that point. Just making sure any of these ones that are still caught in there are going to rise to the surface. All right, and now for the fun part. We're going to add the saran wrap that is going to create this texture, or the cling wrap, whatever you want to call it. So you're going to get some cling wrap. And typically I wouldn't have my molds all together like this. I would separate them a little bit so that there's a bit of space. But I just wanted to make sure that they're all in frame. So I'm going to start at the center and lightly press out. And what I'm trying to do by doing it that way is I'm trying to not to get bubbles stuck beneath the cling wrap surface there. And I can see one right there. I'm just going to push that out of the way. Easier to push them out of the way while you see them than wish that you had noticed them and didn't miss them. Now, having said that, sometimes the bubbles look really, really cool. So if you happen to catch a bubble and you like the way it looks, all is not lost. For instance, there's a bubble sitting, this one trapped a few in there. But they do look kind of cool. Once we add the mica powders to them, they do have a cool look to them. So if by chance you like that look and you want to have them in there, by all means. I'm seeing a couple bubbles in here, but I'm just going to leave them. So to get a look like this, I did this with my saran wrap. I have it all scrunched up, but what you could do if you wanted is you could do it kind of lines like this, and it would almost look like waves. Got one big bubble there that I'm trying to push out of the way. And it's not wanting to pop, so all I can do, or what I can do, is I can lift it up and then pop it with my toothpick there. So I'm gonna make this one have some waves to it. Just because I think that would be a fun look. In order to get a look like this, I'm just taking a piece of bubble wrap and putting it down, pressing it into the resin. There is going to be a halo around the edge like this. There's no way to get around that. That's just the way it is. There's no possible way to make sure it is there right to the end. It just wants to lift the plastic anyways. So once you've got good contact, leave that alone. I thought it'd be kind of interesting to have half smooth and half with the bubbles. So I took a piece of bubble wrap and I just ripped it till I had a look that I liked. I'm going to try that with this one here. See what happens there. And then I have a piece of really big bubble wrap. So we're going to try this one just to see what happens with that. Now this one obviously is going to have a bigger halo around the outside, but that's okay. I'm just kind of interested in seeing what happens, and I'm actually going to put this on top of it. Actually, I'll put one that's as big as the coaster on top of it, just to hold it down because it seems to want to lift it up. So now we have to let that cure completely. So I always do 24 hours. I think you might be able to do 12 hours, but if the resin is at all sticky and you start to pull that plastic up, you're just going to get goopy resin coming out of it. So I like to wait until it's completely fully cured and I don't have to worry about the possibility of ruining my coaster. And no need to cover most of these up because you're not going to have dust falling into them. But with the technique that we're using, we're going to be putting another layer of resin on top of this afterwards, so we don't necessarily have to worry about protecting it. But I'm going to leave it just like that, and we'll see you tomorrow once they've cured.